So we're going to end our look at form validating with JavaScript. And by no means have we covered everything that you can do to validate forms with JavaScript. Again, the point of these videos is to introduce you to get your feet wet to the basic principles. Anyhow, we're going to look at a very simple example here, which I created for us on the side. A very simple form with checks for first name and email address. And I created a little extra button here so we could check the validation routine before submitting. It's redundant. It's just for the sake of our little training tutorials. Let's just jump into the code first, and we'll take it from there. So here's our form. And the thing that you got to take away is, again, the name of the form is send email. And on the submit, we return check form, of course. With this variation of the form, we have two input boxes, one called name underscore first, the other called email underscore address. I've included a reset button this time to clear our form as opposed to doing it in JavaScript this time. So what we're going to do is check our check underscore form function here, which of course is called on the submit. So let's scroll up. First thing we do is we create two variables, name underscore first, email underscore address. And basically we're setting these to be the value of those particular form elements. So the first form is the name underscore first form element. The second one is the email underscore address element. I call them element, but they're just the input boxes, right? Name underscore first, email underscore address. So there you go. I then use these variables in this if statement, this conditional. I could have just typed this in right in here and typed this in right in here. But by creating variables like this, now it makes this line of code a lot cleaner and easier to use, right? Since we have just this little reference here, this little piece of text, for instance, name first. It's a lot easier to read on this line than having all of this document.sendMail.name._first.value. You get the idea. If you recall, in previous videos, we did look at the index of function. So I assume that you remember what that is. If you have it, just go back to that videos because I'm not going to go over this again since we've done it before. So what's new here? First, we have an if statement, and we're first checking to see if the email address has this particular symbol in there. And this is what this is. Basically we're looking for, we're not checking for this symbol. This is the @ symbol in the email address. We're checking to see if it doesn't have that symbol. And that's because, you know from our first exploration of index of, if it doesn't contain a piece of text, it will return a -1. So this first part of the conditional statement is saying, if email address, the variable email address, which contains the value of our email underscore address field in our form, if it's equal to -1, or these two pipes, these are the two pipe symbols, which is usually on top of the enter key on your keyboard. This is called the OR symbol, OR operator. So basically, this allows us to combine two if statements in one. This is something new we haven't looked at. So basically, this is, if this is true, or if this is true, then we do this, else we do this, right? Normally, you might use two if statements or two if else's as we did before, but this is a nice shorter way of doing it. So this or this, if they're true, then we're going to return false. Does that make sense? This could be true and this could be false, but it will return still false because both have to return false, right? This has to be, both of these statements have to be not true for this stuff to get fired off. It's kind of reverse logic. You see that a lot in programming. The logic is kind of reversed, kind of backwards, and I still have trouble with it sometimes. I still mix it up because I'm like dyslexic almost, if you understand what I mean. Well, I'm dyslexic in terms of the logic in my head sometimes. It's weird. My left is my right is my left. And if you look at this, it's kind of reverse logic because what we're doing here is we're checking to see if this is equal to -1, right? And if it's equal to -1, that means that they did not put the @ symbol in this particular input box here, right? So does that make sense? And we're also checking to see if they didn't fill in any information. So this is like two quotes basically denoting a blank text field in name. Does that make sense? This may be a little bit more difficult to wrap your head around this, but just understand the basics of this particular line of code. So any of these happen to be true, then we fire off this alert saying, hey, fill in the form, and we don't submit the form. If they're both false, which means they filled in the form, that means we fire off this alert, we will return true, which means that the form will be sent off. I hope that makes sense. So let's play with this a little bit. So I'm just going to leave it blank here. And I'm just going to hit submit. Fill in the form properly, dude. So the form is not submitted because we didn't do it properly. I also did a check form here. This is a button. We'll do the same thing, right? And I don't know why. I just wanted to do that as an example now. I added a bunch of CSS to give it some color, but check form. See, I'm just unclick, fire check form. Now, this is not going to submit the form or anything. It's just going to run this function and check it for us. In terms of controlling the form, this only gets fired on the onSubmit. That means when we click the submit button right down here. So let's go back to our live page. So I'm going to put in just a bit of text. I'm going to leave that empty. I hit submit. Fill in the form properly, dude. Right? Because we didn't put our @ symbol. Even if I put more text in here, fill in the form properly, dude. We didn't fill in the form properly. For this form to be filled in properly, according to our rules, we need to have the @ symbol, which is using an email address. Now I'm going to use the check form so we don't submit the form, and we're going to get a different alert box. The alert box indicating that, yes, indeed, the form is filled in. You filled in the form, let's go. So we don't go forward. Why? Because this is being called, the check form function is being called on this here, but it doesn't affect the form. So that's why I actually put it here, because I want to show you that even though you could run this function, right, from anywhere in your page, if you want it, but for it to have the effect of stopping the form from going, you need to apply this function using the onSubmit here to this particular form. So let's click the button now. Now, when I submit this, it's going to take us to the next page. So it says, you filled in the form, let's go, okay. Takes us to our Cure Sites page. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So we're going to leave form processing for now, and we're going to jump into our next subject. And we're going to jump into our next subject, which is getting deeper into the document object model. In this next video, we're actually going to be using the DOM to do some stuff to the pages, actually do some practical things to move stuff around, stuff like that. So I'm hoping that you guys are now finding this JavaScript a little bit more interesting, since we're actually doing things, active things to the pages.